In the cold expanse of space, where countless civilizations had risen and fallen, the Galactic Alliance stood as a symbol of power. Comprised of advanced species whose technology had long surpassed anything humanity could imagine, they were the undisputed rulers of the stars, or so they thought. The Terran Federation, a young and relatively small player in the galactic theater, had long been dismissed as insignificant, a primitive species too preoccupied with internal struggles to pose any real threat. Admiral Varkan of the Karath, one of the dominant species of the Alliance, stood at the command deck of his flagship, the Unyielding. His towering form, covered in intricately detailed armor, exuded an aura of confidence that only centuries of military supremacy could produce. He had seen countless battles, defeated countless foes, and yet the Terrans, in his eyes, were a curiosity. An annoyance at best, a joke at worst. The Terran Federation had expanded its borders in recent years, but the Alliance had always regarded them with a mixture of amusement and contempt. Varkan had heard whispers of the Terrans' so-called battleships, but to him, they were nothing more than clunky, outdated vessels that could barely stand up to even the weakest of the Alliance's warships. Their technology was no match for the Karath, or so he believed. As Varkan stood on the bridge, his fingers drummed lightly against the control panel before him. He glanced out at the vast expanse of stars through the viewport, his mind already anticipating the swift victory that would come with the eradication of the Terran threat. "It's almost too easy," he muttered to himself, the corners of his mouth curling into a satisfied grin. His chief strategist, Voslin, stood nearby, fidgeting with the edge of his uniform. Despite his nervous demeanor, he had been with Varkan for decades, and his loyalty to the Admiral was unquestionable. "Admiral, are we certain the Terrans will engage us head-on?" he asked, his voice tinged with doubt. Varkan's gaze shifted to his subordinate, his expression one of mild annoyance. "Of course they will. They have no choice. They are outmatched and outgunned. Their battleships are outdated. They'll be begging for mercy before the first wave of our attack even reaches them." The Admiral waved off Voslin's concern with a flick of his hand. He had seen this before. Every time the Alliance encountered a new species, they were either quickly subdued or eliminated. The Terrans, like so many others, would fall into the same predictable pattern. It was just a matter of time. The strategy was simple: a direct assault. The Alliance fleet would approach the Terran systems, overwhelming them with superior firepower and precision strikes. The Terrans had no hope of defending themselves. Varkan had already decided that he would personally oversee the destruction of their capital ship, the U.S. Valor. The name alone seemed laughable to him. Valor. As if the Terrans had any understanding of true power. His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden burst of static from the communication system. A subordinate officer on the bridge, one of the younger Karath soldiers, flinched as the transmission came through. "Admiral, there is a report about the Valor. It's moving towards us." Varkan straightened. His eyes narrowed. "What do you mean, moving towards us?" he demanded, his tone sharp. "It appears to be coming straight for us, Admiral." "It's..." The officer hesitated, clearly uneasy. "It's much faster than we anticipated." Varkan's lip curled into a sneer. "Impossible. The Terran ship couldn't possibly outpace us. It's a relic." But despite his words, a flicker of doubt crept into his mind. Still, he quickly dismissed it. The Valor was no match for the might of the Galactic Alliance. He turned to Voslin, giving a dismissive wave. "Ready the fleet. We will crush them in minutes." As Varkan issued his orders, he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that he was overlooking something. But the thought was fleeting. In his mind, the Terrans had no chance. Their so-called battleships were nothing compared to the power of the Alliance. His arrogance, born from centuries of military superiority, clouded any rational thought that might have suggested otherwise. And as the Alliance fleet moved forward, it was clear to all who watched. This battle would be over before it even truly began. The stage was set, But the Terrans were about to show the galaxy that underestimating them was a fatal mistake. The vast reaches of space were eerily silent as the Galactic Alliance fleet advanced toward the Terran Federation's border. The stars seemed to fade into the background, the sheer weight of the Alliance's might dominating everything in its path. But deep within the heart of Terran space, a very different reality was unfolding. Captain Olivia Gray stood in front of the command panel of the U.S. Valor, her fingers tracing the contours of a holographic map. Her expression was calm, though her mind was sharp, every detail of the upcoming battle clear in her mind. The Valor was humanity's finest ship, a testament to Terran ingenuity, built with every advantage they had managed to pull together from the scraps of an intergalactic war that many thought they could never survive. Though small in comparison to the Alliance's behemoths, the Valor was a marvel of human engineering. Around her, the crew worked with precision, the hum of their combined efforts filling the bridge. The crew of the Valor, engineers, tacticians, soldiers, and pilots, were all dedicated to a single cause: protecting their home and showing the galaxy that humanity was not to be underestimated. "Captain," came the voice of Commander Jonath, her first officer, from across the room. His expression was a mix of concern and anticipation. "The Alliance fleet is approaching. They're heading straight for us." Olivia's gaze hardened. She had known this day would come. She had hoped it would be further in the future, but humanity's enemies had underestimated them for far too long. Now the galaxy's powerhouses were making their move, and the Terrans would have to defend themselves. "Status of our fleet?" Olivia asked, her voice steady. "Only a handful of our battleships are ready for this kind of engagement, Captain. The rest are still being constructed or are far from our home systems, but the Valor is operational and ready. We've also deployed our fighters and support ships," Jonath replied. Olivia nodded, eyes still fixed on the holographic display. The Terran Federation, while still relatively young in terms of spacefaring capability, had quietly been working on its own military advancements. They had taken their time, learning from the mistakes of others and adapting with a speed that surprised even their most hopeful leaders. The Terrans had built their reputation not on strength alone, but on their relentless drive to outthink and outmaneuver their enemies. "Get the fleet into position. We'll face them head-on," Olivia ordered, her voice calm yet commanding. She wasn't nervous. She knew the Valor could handle it. What the Alliance didn't realize was that it wasn't just the ship that was dangerous. It was the humans who piloted it. The Valor's advanced AI, designed to anticipate and counter enemy tactics, began running simulations, preparing for the incoming onslaught. The ship was equipped with an array of powerful weapons, but more importantly, it had human intuition on its side, something that no machine, no matter how advanced, could replicate. As the fleet of the Galactic Alliance closed in, a quiet hum filled the ship. The crew took their stations, their faces set in grim determination. Olivia had been through battles before, but nothing of this scale. The pressure was immense, but she refused to let it shake her. She turned to Jonath. "Once the first wave hits, we'll need to disrupt their communications. Get to work on that." Jonath's face split into a grin. "Already ahead of you, Captain. We got a few surprises in store for them." The Terran fleet took its position as the enemy drew closer. The Valor and its sister ships began to move, their sleek designs cutting through the darkness like predatory animals on the hunt. The Galactic Alliance was still unaware of what awaited them. The Terrans' readiness, their adaptability, and their hidden strength would soon reveal themselves. As the two forces closed the distance, Olivia couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. This would be the day humanity showed the galaxy what they were capable of. It wasn't just about defending their homes. It was about proving that no one, not even the most powerful alliance in the galaxy, could ignore them any longer. The silence of space was shattered by the sound of the first exchange of fire. The Terrans were no longer just spectators in this war. They were players, and they had a few tricks up their sleeves that no one, especially Admiral Varkan, had anticipated. And as the first shots were fired, the Valor was ready. The quiet Terran response was about to become a loud, unmistakable statement to the galaxy. The initial blast of energy from the U.S. Valor rang out through space, a bright streak of light slicing through the void. The Galactic Alliance fleet had barely begun its assault when the Terran battleship launched its first strike. The sheer force of the attack caught the Karath off guard. The Alliance's warships, so accustomed to superior firepower, faltered for a moment, unprepared for the precision and power of the human ship. "Admiral," they fired first. The officer at Varkan's side exclaimed, eyes wide with disbelief. Varkan's face tightened into a snarl. He had expected the Terrans to retreat, to scatter in fear as their ships had done in past skirmishes. But this was different. His fleet was still far from being in range to return fire, yet the Valor had struck with devastating accuracy. The Alliance flagship had suffered significant damage, shields flickering weakly in the wake of the blast. "Shields at 70%, shouted a subordinate from across the bridge, panic creeping into their voice. Varkan's fury boiled over, but he contained it, his expression hardening with a mix of rage and disbelief. "Return fire. All ships, open fire," he barked. The Karath were not known for their tolerance of failures, and their sense of superiority had been deeply wounded in an instant. The Alliance fleet, once cocky and confident, now began to regroup, launching retaliatory strikes toward the Valor. But the Terrans had anticipated this. Captain Olivia Gray stood unshaken, her eyes scanning the battle map with cold precision. "Initiate evasive maneuvers, now," she ordered, her voice calm but commanding. The Valor began to weave through the incoming fire, its movements quick and unpredictable. Each time an enemy ship aimed at it, the Valor was already moving, gliding just out of reach of the weapon's fire. The Terran AI worked in perfect sync with the ship's maneuvers, predicting the path of enemy shots and guiding the ship with unnerving accuracy. The Karath were fast, but the Valor was faster. "What's happening?" Varkan demanded, his hands clenching into fists. His fleet, despite its overwhelming numbers, could not land a single direct hit on the Valor. The Terran ship danced through the chaos, outmaneuvering them at every turn. And the Karath were growing desperate. "We are being outmaneuvered, Admiral," a technician reported. "Their ship is dodging all our attacks." Varkan's blood boiled. His experience with space battles had never included anything like this. His ships were designed for efficiency, for overwhelming force, and yet here was a single Terran vessel, dodging his fleet's every move, turning his own strength against him. "Concentrate fire. I want that ship destroyed," Varkan growled, his voice full of venom. But the Valor was ready for this. As the Karath fleet regrouped for another round of attacks, Olivia's tactical genius came into play. She knew that the Alliance's weapons, while powerful, were designed for precision, but could not keep up with the erratic, unpredictable movements of the Valor. She made a quick calculation in her mind and gave the order. "Deploy decoys, full power to the main cannon. Let's show them what human ingenuity can do." Without hesitation, the Valor released a series of small, rapidly decelerating drones, each one projecting the signature of the battleship itself. The decoys emitted the same energy signature as the Valor, effectively confusing the targeting systems of the Karath ships. The decoys moved erratically, making it even harder for the Alliance fleet to land a blow. At the same time, the Valor's main cannon powered up. The Karath fleet, now distracted by the decoys, failed to notice the real Valor charging its most powerful weapon. With a crack of thunderous energy, the Valor unleashed a burst of destructive force, aimed at Varkan's flagship. Varkan barely had time to react before his flagship's shields crumpled under the sustained fire. The blast rocked the ship, sending shockwaves through its hull and sending out alarms across the bridge. "Shields at critical levels, Admiral," one of his officers shouted. Varkan's face twisted in disbelief. His flagship was under attack, and the Valor, A ship he had considered a joke was the one doing the damage. The tide of the battle was turning faster than he could have imagined. "Pull back!" Varkan screamed, his pride wounded beyond recognition. He had underestimated the Terrans, and now they were making him pay for it. But it was too late. The Terran ship had already taken control of the battlefield. The Valor continued to move, effortlessly dodging and striking back, and the Karath fleet was starting to fall apart. With every passing minute, the once confident Alliance ships became more disorganized, their superior firepower now useless against the relentless, unpredictable tactics of the Terrans. In the chaos, a new realization set in. This would not be a quick victory for the Karath. The Terrans were not the weaklings they had assumed. The Valor had proven that. And Admiral Varkan's plans were already slipping through his fingers. The battle raged on, and the tide was turning faster than Varkan could manage. The once imposing fleet of the Galactic Alliance was now in disarray, scattered and disoriented by the relentless, unorthodox tactics of the Terran forces. Admiral Varkan's confidence had evaporated, replaced by a cold, furious disbelief. "Why aren't we hitting them?" Varkan barked, his hands gripping the armrests of his command chair. His voice was edged with panic, a stark contrast to the calm authority he had once exuded. The officer at his side, her face ashen, didn't answer immediately. Instead, she glanced nervously at the status board. The Alliance's weaponry systems, once finely tuned to annihilate entire fleets, were failing to land any significant blows on the Valor. The human ship danced through their fire like a ghost in the dark, evasive, unpredictable, and relentless. "Admiral," she finally spoke, her voice shaky. "The Valor. It's too fast, too adaptive. Our systems can't compensate for the speed of their maneuvers. Our weapons can't lock onto their ship." Varkan's rage flared. His fleet, built to crush any foe, was being systematically dismantled by a single Terran vessel. It was a humiliation unlike any he had ever known. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing on him. He needed to regain control, to strike back with force. But the more he ordered his fleet to attack, the more it slipped through his fingers. The Terran ship was always one step ahead, and every time they counterattacked, it felt like another blow to his pride. Meanwhile, the U.S. Valor continued to weave through space, its crew working seamlessly as one. Olivia Gray stood at the heart of it all, her mind working tirelessly, analyzing every move the Karath fleet made and finding ways to exploit their weaknesses. Every order she gave, every maneuver the Valor executed, was calculated and precise. There was no room for error. Every moment, every second, counted. "Commander, status on their movements?" Captain Gray asked, her voice cool despite the chaos. Jonathan, her first officer, watched the screens intently. "Their formations are breaking down. They're trying to regroup, but it's clear they're losing cohesion. The moment we hit them again, it'll be chaos." Olivia nodded, her eyes narrowing. The Karath were powerful, yes, but their pride and overconfidence had clouded their judgment. They expected to crush the Terrans, to eradicate them quickly and without resistance. They hadn't counted on the relentless resourcefulness and tenacity of humanity. "Continue the pressure," Olivia commanded. "Let's finish what we started." As the Valor re-engaged, its fighters darted forward, weaving through the Karath fleet, launching precision strikes. The decoys they had deployed earlier continued to wreak havoc, drawing fire away from the real Valor and causing confusion among the Karath ranks. The Terran fleet, though outnumbered, used their smaller, more agile ships to their advantage, cutting through the larger, less maneuverable Alliance vessels with deadly efficiency. Back on the bridge of the Unyielding, Varkan fumed, his eyes wide with disbelief. His ships were being torn apart by the relentless, well-executed strikes. One of his flagship's weapon turrets exploded, sending debris spiraling into space. "How is this happening?" Varkan growled, his hands shaking with frustration. "They should be crumbling under our fire. We outnumber them. We outgun them." His chief strategist, Voslin, stepped forward, his expression grim. "Admiral, They've adapted. The Terrans, they think differently. Their tactics aren't based on overwhelming force. They're based on evasion and intelligence. They know exactly what we're trying to do, and are countering every move. Varkon clenched his jaw. I don't care about their tactics. He spat. I will destroy them. Focus all fire on the Valor. I will not let a single human ship survive this. But as he gave the order, it became apparent that the battle had already passed the point of no return. The Karath fleet was splintering, each ship retreating in disarray, and Varkon's command was losing its grip on the battlefield. His flagship, the Unyielding, was beginning to take on more damage than it could handle. The Valor was everywhere, its weapons flashing, its fighters cutting through the chaos like knives through butter. Varkon's pride was bleeding, and he could no longer ignore the creeping fear that he had made a fatal mistake. He had underestimated the Terrans, and now the consequences were becoming clear. His fleet, which had once been unstoppable, was losing to the humans, not because they lacked power, but because they possessed something far more dangerous: the will to adapt, to fight, and to never back down. And as the Karath continued to fall back, Varkon realized that the Valor wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. The Terran resilience, their refusal to be crushed, was proving to be their greatest weapon. The Karath fleet was beginning to falter, their once pristine formations now shattered. The Unyielding, the flagship of Admiral Varkon, was battered and burning. The hum of the ship's damaged systems echoed through the command deck as the Admiral gripped the armrests of his chair, his eyes locked on the battle outside the viewport. The Terran ship U.S. Valor was everywhere, dancing between the stars, cutting through his forces with frightening precision, leaving chaos in its wake. Varkon's breathing was ragged, a mixture of disbelief and fury. The pride he had held for so long, the arrogance that had carried him to this point in his career, had crumbled in the face of a single Terran ship. The humiliation was unbearable. And yet, it wasn't just the Valor that was causing the damage. It was the Terran crew, their unyielding resolve to fight back, to adapt, to outthink him at every turn. Admiral, the fleet is in disarray. Ships are retreating, reported Voslin, his voice low, almost defeated. He, too, had never expected this. The Karath had faced numerous enemies in their time, but never had they encountered an adversary like this. The Terrans were different. They fought not just with weapons, but with intelligence and tenacity. Varkon's hands clenched into fists. He was a seasoned warrior, but this battle was slipping through his fingers. I gave you orders, he snapped. Focus fire on the Valor. But Admiral, Voslin hesitated, his gaze flickering to the large screen showing the Valor's evasive maneuvers. It's no use. We can't land a hit. Their technology is different from what we anticipated. Varkon slammed his fist into the armrest. I will not retreat. Prepare to fire all remaining weapons on that ship. I want it destroyed. Now. Even as he gave the orders, Varkon knew, deep down, that he was losing control. The Valor was a nightmare, its crew an enigma, their strategies impossible to predict. Every time the Alliance fleet tried to regroup, it was thrown off balance by the Valor's unpredictable movements and precision strikes. The Karath had faced war on many fronts, but never had they encountered a foe so relentless in their defense. Meanwhile, on the Valor, Captain Olivia Gray stood firm at the command panel. The battle had not been easy, but humanity's resilience was shining through in every maneuver. The crew of the Valor worked like a well-oiled machine, their minds focused, their hearts determined. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a statement to the galaxy that humanity had the strength to face the most powerful forces in the universe. Commander Jonath, Olivia called, her voice calm amidst the chaos. Status report. Jonath glanced at the screens, his brow furrowed. We've disabled several of their ships, Captain, but they're not giving up. The Unyielding is still in play, and they're focusing everything they have on us. Olivia's eyes flickered to the display showing the Unyielding, the heart of the Karath fleet. It was heavily damaged, but still operational, still trying to make a stand. She knew the longer the battle dragged on, the more desperate Varkon would become. The Karath had the numbers, but the Terrans had something they hadn't counted on: their ability to turn the tide with every decision, every strike. "Full power to our main cannon," Olivia ordered. "Let's end this." With a resounding hum, the Valor's main weapon powered up, its energy core surging with power. In the distance, the Karath flagship loomed, still attempting to regain control of the situation. But it was too late. The Valor had already calculated the perfect trajectory. The Unyielding had been exposed during its last desperate counterattack, and now it would pay the price. "Firing," Jonath called, his voice steady, even though the tension in the room was palpable. The Valor unleashed its full might. A beam of concentrated energy shot forward, faster than anything the Karath fleet could hope to counter. The beam struck the Unyielding dead center, piercing through its damaged shields and ripping through the hull like paper. For a moment, the ship shuddered, its systems flashing in protest, but it could not withstand the force. On the bridge of the Unyielding, Varkon screamed in frustration as alarms blared. The blast from the Valor had crippled the flagship. Fires erupted along the outer hull, and the core systems began to fail. "Admiral, we've lost all power to the engines," an officer cried out. "We're dead in the water." Varkon's jaw clenched. His fleet was broken, and the heart of the Karath force was dying. It was a defeat beyond his understanding. How had he allowed this to happen? How had he underestimated humanity so completely? As the Unyielding began to drift, its systems failing, Varkon knew it was over. His fleet was in ruins. The Terrans had not just survived. They had won. And as the stars around him seemed to grow dimmer, Varkon realized that this battle would be a turning point not just for him, but for the entire galaxy. The Terrans had made their mark. The galaxy would never be the same. As the Unyielding drifted helplessly in space, its engines sputtering and its shields failing, the remaining Karath ships scattered like leaves in a storm. The once proud fleet, now broken and disorganized, was a shadow of its former strength. Captain Olivia Gray stood at the center of the bridge of the U.S. Valor, her eyes locked on the unfolding scene. The Terran victory was not yet complete. There was still the matter of securing the battlefield and making sure the Karath could not retaliate. "Captain," Jonath spoke, his voice grave as he surveyed the enemy fleet's condition. "The Karath are retreating. The few remaining ships are trying to flee the sector." Olivia nodded, her gaze unwavering. The victory was sweet, but the cost was heavy. The Valor had taken damage, and though their losses were minimal compared to the Karath's, they were still significant. Several Terran ships had been lost in the chaos, and hundreds of lives had been sacrificed in the struggle. But it wasn't just the physical toll. It was the emotional weight. They had fought not only for their survival, but to send a message to the galaxy that humanity was not to be underestimated. "Send a communication to the remaining ships," Olivia ordered, her voice steady. "Tell them to pursue the retreating Karath, and make sure they don't escape this sector. No survivors." Jonath hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Understood, Captain." As the crew moved to carry out the orders, Olivia took a moment to reflect. The Karath had been relentless, but they had underestimated the Terrans. They thought humanity was weak, incapable of standing up against a force as mighty as theirs. They had been wrong. The battle was more than just a fight for survival. It was a declaration. The Terrans had made their mark, and they would not be pushed around any longer. But the price of that victory was not lost on Olivia. She knew that this battle would ripple across the galaxy, bringing attention from all sides. The Karath were powerful, and their defeat would not be taken lightly. Other factions would take notice, and they would come, testing the resolve of the Terrans. This was only the beginning. "Captain," Jonath's voice interrupted her thoughts. "We've received a transmission from the Karath fleet. They're requesting a ceasefire." Olivia raised an eyebrow. The Karath were desperate. Their pride had been shattered, and now they were trying to salvage what little remained of their dignity. It was typical of the Karath to try to negotiate after a defeat, but Olivia wasn't interested in half measures. "Ceasefire," Olivia repeated, her voice low. "Not a chance." She turned to Jonath. "Prepare our forces for a full sweep of the sector. If they try to run, we'll make sure they don't get far. We're not letting anyone escape this time." Jonath looked back at her, a glint of understanding in his eyes. The Terrans weren't in the business of mercy. They had fought too hard for their freedom, and they weren't going to allow the Karath to regroup and come back stronger. Not after what had happened today. As the Valor's weapons powered up again, Olivia's mind raced. She had just proven that the Terrans could stand toe-to-toe with the galaxy's mightiest fleets, but she knew this victory would come at a price. The Karath were just one of many forces vying for control of the galaxy. There would be others, and they would be watching closely, ready to test humanity's strength. "Captain," Jonath said again, his voice tinged with caution, "we're picking up multiple signatures on the outer rim. It's not the Karath." Olivia turned sharply. "Who is it?" Jonath's fingers danced across the control panel. "It looks like a fleet of neutral ships, but they're approaching fast. It's hard to tell their intent, but they're coming in fast." Olivia's instincts kicked into overdrive. The last thing they needed now was another confrontation. She needed to act fast. The Valor was in no condition to face another large force, especially not with the Karath still lingering nearby. "Sound general quarters," Olivia ordered, her voice hard. "Prepare for possible engagement. I want all stations ready. If they mean to attack, we'll make sure they regret it." The crew scrambled into action, the buzz of preparations filling the bridge. Olivia's mind raced. The Terrans had just sent a clear message to the galaxy. They were not to be taken lightly. But this was only one battle in a much larger war. The Karath were defeated, but who would be next? The galaxy was vast, and every victory brought new challenges. As the new fleet approached, Olivia steeled herself. The Valor was more than just a ship. It was a symbol of humanity's defiance. The galaxy would see it, and they would remember. The Terrans would not be pushed aside. They would fight, and they would win. The tension aboard the U.S. Valor was palpable as the crew worked feverishly to prepare for whatever threat was coming. Olivia stood at the center of the bridge, her eyes narrowing as she watched the approaching fleet on the holographic display. It wasn't the Karath, and that alone was enough to send a shiver down her spine. The Karath had been a known enemy, their tactics and strategies predictable. But this new fleet, whoever they were, represented an unknown variable, one that could either be an ally or another enemy to fight. "Captain," Jonath spoke, his voice calm but filled with concern. "They're approaching rapidly. I'm reading several heavy capital ships in their formation." Olivia's heart skipped a beat. A new fleet of capital ships meant significant firepower. If they were enemies, it could be a battle the Valor wasn't prepared for, especially after the strain of their previous confrontation with the Karath. "Any identification?" Olivia asked, her voice steady despite the rising tension. Jonath shook his head. "I'm still trying to get a clear read on their energy signatures. They're using a different frequency than anything we've encountered before." The unknowns piled up, and Olivia couldn't afford to wait any longer. She needed answers. "Open a communication channel," she ordered. A tense silence hung in the air as the crew scrambled to establish contact. After a few moments, a distorted transmission crackled through the bridge. A deep voice, cold and calculating, came through the speakers. "This is High Commander Iktarak of the Zelkor Dominion. You have encroached upon our territory." Olivia's brow furrowed. The Zelkor Dominion. She had heard rumors of them, an ancient race known for their militaristic society and brutal conquests. They were said to control vast swaths of space, but the Dominion was distant, isolated. Humanity had never interacted with them, at least not directly. "High Commander Iktarak, Olivia replied, keeping her voice firm. "This is Captain Olivia Gray of the U.S. Valor. We're not here to provoke anyone. We were engaged in a battle with the Karath, and now we're securing the sector. If you're not here to assist, then I suggest you move on." A cold chuckle echoed through the comm channel. "You misunderstand, Terran. The Karath are insignificant. Your battle with them is of no consequence to us. What matters is that you have entered our space, and that is something we cannot allow." Olivia's mind raced. This was the challenge she had feared. The Karath had been an immediate threat, but now the Zelkor Dominion loomed as a much greater danger. If they were as powerful as their reputation suggested, the Valor might not survive a confrontation. But she couldn't show weakness. Not now. "We are not here to take anything from you," Olivia said, her voice colder now. "We are simply securing our own survival. If you want to challenge us, then you're going to have to deal with the consequences." The Zelkor commander's voice was filled with disdain. "We will deal with you, Terran, and we will enjoy it." Without another word, the transmission was abruptly cut off, and the Zelkor fleet surged forward, closing the distance with terrifying speed. Olivia didn't need to be told twice. "Battle stations," she shouted. "All hands to battle stations. Prepare for combat. Activate shields and weapons. We're not backing down." The bridge came alive with activity. Crew members manned their stations with a sense of urgency, their faces lit by the glow of the tactical screens. Olivia could feel the weight of the moment. The Karath had been a victory, but this new enemy was something different. The Zelkor weren't just another warlike race. They were ancient, with resources and knowledge that the Terrans could scarcely fathom. If the Valor was going to survive this, they would need more than just clever tactics. They would need to fight with everything they had. "Captain," Jonath's voice broke through her thoughts, "their ships are locking onto us. Their weapons are powered up." Olivia's eyes narrowed. Brace for impact. In an instant, the Zelkor fleet unleashed a barrage of energy blasts toward the Valor. The ship rocked as the first volley struck its shields, sending a jolt through the hull. Olivia gritted her teeth. The Valor could take hits, but it couldn't take too many. "Return fire," she ordered, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Target their lead ship. We need to make them bleed." The Valor's weapons powered up, and the ship's main cannons fired, sending a streak of brilliant energy toward the closest Zelkor vessel. The enemy ship erupted in a cloud of sparks and energy as the blast struck its shields, but it didn't go down. The Zelkor were formidable. This would be a fight unlike any Olivia had faced before. As the first wave of enemy fire came in, Olivia knew one thing for certain. The stakes had just gotten much higher. The galaxy was full of dangers, and the Terrans had just become a target. But the Valor was no stranger to overcoming impossible odds, and Olivia had no intention of backing down. Not now. Not ever. The U.S. Valor shook violently as the Zelkor's weapons pummeled its shields. Each blast sent tremors through the ship, reverberating through the hull, but the Valor held strong, its shield generators working overtime to absorb the punishing energy. Olivia Gray stood firm at the center of the bridge, her focus unwavering despite the chaos unfolding around her. The Zelkor fleet, vast and formidable, had no intention of letting the Terrans go unchallenged. "Captain, their capital ships are closing in," Jonath reported, his voice tense but controlled. "They're preparing to launch boarding pods. It looks like they're preparing for a full assault." Olivia's mind raced. Boarding actions meant they were about to enter hand-to-hand combat, something she had hoped to avoid. The Zelkor were a brutal species, known for their ferocity in close quarters. She could already imagine the horrors their troops could inflict if they breached the Valor. "Activate all internal security measures. Seal all access points to critical areas," Olivia ordered, her voice cold with determination. "Prepare our forces for boarding action." The crew sprang into action, activating force fields and reinforcing the ship's defenses. Olivia's mind was elsewhere, focused on the Zelkor ships advancing relentlessly. She had seen their firepower, their ship's devastating energy weapons, and she knew that the Valor couldn't withstand this much longer unless they found a way to turn the tide. "Captain," Jonath said, looking back at her, "their lead ship has a weak point in its propulsion system. We could fire a concentrated blast and cripple it, but it'll take everything we have left in the cannon." Olivia didn't hesitate. "Do it." The order was given, and the Valor's weapons powered up once more, the hum of the energy core filling the bridge. The Zelkor ship loomed larger in the viewport as it approached, and Olivia's pulse quickened. If they could take down their leadership, it might disrupt the entire Zelkor formation and give the Terrans a chance to escape. It was a risky move, but it was the only chance they had. "Firing in 3, 2, 1, Jonath called. The blast tore through space, a streak of brilliance cutting through the dark. The Zelkor ship flared with energy as it was struck, its shields faltering before the shot pierced its hull. The ship groaned and shuddered, and then, as if in slow motion, it began to list to one side. Explosions erupted along its length as the damage cascaded through its systems. "We've disabled their lead ship," Jonath shouted, a note of triumph in his voice. "The rest of the Zelkor fleet is slowing down." The Valor's crew erupted in cheers, but Olivia's expression remained grim. This victory, though significant, wasn't enough to guarantee their survival. The Zelkor fleet was still a threat, and their forces weren't going to stop just because one ship was disabled. There were more, and they were angry. "Don't celebrate just yet," Olivia cautioned. "We need to end this now." The Zelkor fleet, though momentarily stunned by the loss of their flagship, quickly began regrouping. Their remaining ships began to shift into new formations, attempting to close in on the Valor once more. But the Valor's crew was relentless, and their resolve was stronger than ever. "Captain," Jonath spoke again, his voice urgent. "We've received a transmission from the Zelkor's remaining forces. They're offering a ceasefire. They've lost their command ship, and their morale is breaking." Olivia considered the offer for a long moment, the weight of the decision pressing on her. This was their chance to avoid further bloodshed. But would the Zelkor honor their word? She had no doubt that if they left the enemy with any shred of strength, they would return with a vengeance. "No ceasefire," Olivia said firmly, her voice cutting through the tension in the room. "We finish this now." With a final decisive order, she commanded the Valor to press forward. The remaining Zelkor ships, their morale shattered by the loss of their flagship, faltered. The Terran forces capitalized on this, launching a series of concentrated strikes against the remaining Zelkor vessels. Each strike was a calculated blow, weakening the enemy's ability to respond. Minutes later, the Zelkor fleet was in full retreat, their once dominant presence now a shattered shell of its former glory. The Valor had withstood the assault and emerged victorious, though not without cost. The crew stood in silence, watching the last of the Zelkor ships disappear into the depths of space. The battle was over, but the damage had been done. The galaxy would now know that the Terrans were not to be taken lightly. They had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious. But this victory had come at a price, one that they would carry with them into the future. As Olivia looked out at the empty space where the Zelkor fleet had once been, she knew this was just the beginning. The galaxy had noticed their strength, and there would be more to come. But the Terrans had proven that they could survive anything, and they would fight for their place in the stars, no matter who stood in their way.